Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Black as Our History Presents. Y'all late to the revolution. Chapter 1, Resistance from the Beginning. We're actually going to be looking at two chapters, Sacrament, Sugar, and Slaves, and the Uprisings. Again, remember, content, images, and language that you are about to experience may be offensive and may lead to triggers. Viewer discretion is advised. Black as Our History is committed and dedicated to educating its audiences on the diaspora of melanated people with the intent to provide an honest and holistic history of our narratives. We are committed to ensuring our history and stories are not filtered through white supremacy indoctrination, dogma, or pseudo social science. So, again, as a reminder, this is our agenda for this week, and we'll be looking at the sacraments, sugars, and slaves, and the uprisings. So, this is just an image of the transatlantic slave trade. It's dated approximately 1501 to 1867 across Europe and what becomes known as the United States, as well as Central America and South America. So, North America as well. The purple arrows not only show where these enslaved persons were stolen, but where their destinations were located. Additionally, the width of the purple areas also indicate the volume of Africans stolen. The majority of the enslaved Africans were sent to South America and the Caribbean and the West Indies. And there's also the origins of Africans in North America has a breakdown as well, with 37% being from Angola. So this slideshow just shows a flow of goods in the transatlantic slave trade. Keep in mind, although not indicated on the map, enslaved persons were sent to Europe as well. I also want you to notice that Europe did not send any of its natural resources but finished goods, while all the natural resources of Africa, South America, and West Indies were shipped to them. So that's a kind of indicator of what is happening economic wise and what they actually have available to them. So we're going to actually focus our attention on the West Indies as well as present day Central America, picking up from where Columbus left off. Keep in mind, all these islands and lands were inhabited by indigenous people. Originally, Europeans attempted to use the indigenous population for enslavement. However, because of disease and murder, the population dwindled to under 10%. So, of course, the stolen Africans forced into chattel slavery would be forced to work the fields and plantations. And at this time, the king of the crop was sugar. Harvesting sugar canes and working the boiling room or the sugarcane process were the most dangerous jobs on the plantation. Sugarcane can reach the height of 20 feet and must be harvested quickly to preserve. Enslaved persons were responsible and forced to grow, maintain, harvest, process, as well as transfer the sugarcane. So this is a lithograph by John Henson. It's a representation of the sugarcane and the art of making sugar from 1749. And this is kind of a typical setup for the majority of the plantations. The individuals in the foreground next to the sugarcane have to use boiling water to strip down these canes. In the back is the actual sugar mill. Some were powered by water, by horse, but most often it was powered by the enslaved people. One of the saddest things about the sugarcane plantations is that the average life of an enslaved person on a sugar plantation is 7 to 9 years since landing in the Americas. So, in that sense, if you were brought to the plantation at 9, you may, keyword on may, live to see 18. Enslaved Africans would lose digits, limbs, and or have died working on sugar plantations due to the extreme labor and the risk of harvesting sugarcane. Remember, on average, enslaved people worked from dusk till dawn, average 10 to 18 hours, 6 days a week, in addition into that heat. In addition to sugar, cocoa was another profitable product from the West Indies. And this is an example of a cocoa plantation by the Cocoa Walk Estates. And this is actually by Jamaican artist Isaac Mendez Belisaro. Um, and in addition to sugar, cocoa was another large export. Europeans would increase, or desire would increase for chocolate would continuously grow throughout the 17th century. So now you have sugar and chocolate together. Europe had a sweetness addiction. At one point, sugar was considered a drug. And so in London, we opened their first cocoa house in 1600s. So the increase for cocoa will drive an increase for enslaved labor of the Africans. So let's talk about some of these uprisings. So, y'all, I was so excited when I found this map when I was doing the research. This is a screenshot of a wonderful map powered by Google, through Google Maps. And if you type in Google Maps, the Black Diaspora Slave Revolt, this is interactive and it highlights known revolts of enslaved African peoples in both the transatlantic and the trans-Saharan slave trade. Again, we don't talk too much about the trans-Saharan slave trade, which is something that I think we also need to look at. All the different location points are color coded to let you know what century and or if they were at sea. I also put the link in the comments when I post this. So again, this map is incredible to look at, especially with students too. And when you click on each of the little location icons, a video might pop up, additional information, or the outcome of that revolt comes up as well. So one of the earliest rebellions was right off the bat. It's the 1521 Hispaniola slave revolt. This was the first recorded enslaved uprising in the Americas. At the time, Diego Columbus, Christopher Columbus' son, was the governor. It was led by Maria Olofa and Gonzalo Mandinga. Both of them were Muslims of the Wolof tribe of Senegambia. This is important. They attacked around the second day of Christmas. So keep in mind, there's Christmas, and then like the next day, I know specifically in the UK is Boxing Day. So maybe their Christmas celebration was extended. And what they did was they vowed to kill all the Spanish, reclaim their land and end slavery. That was it. Get the white folks out, get their land back, and no slavery. However, on January 6th, when the revolt was subdued, Columbus issued harsh laws for melanated people. Restrictions of mobility on the land for both free and enslaved Africans, limited to no access to weapons, physical torture, and death. Anyone plotting or participating in that uprising. The Los Palmares, from 1604 to 1695, Portuguese began colonizing in Brazil around 1570s. Again, sugar plantation. Escaped enslaved persons, both African and indigenous, started to inflore these settlements called quilombos. Portuguese and then the Dutch would battle over the territory with the quilombos. But for nearly 100 years, there were not just a settlement, but an actual kingdom of formerly enslaved persons and indigenous people thriving in their own community. So we have our first leader. This is of the Palmares, is Ganga Zumba. Again, he's the first leader. They believe he was a descendant of unknown royalty from the Congo. He actually set up Los Palmares as an actual kingdom. So there was palace, there were estates, there was land, there was government. All the kingdom of what he knew from back home, he ensured that it would be established there. Now, in 1678, a peace treaty with the Portuguese governor at the time, apparently, the peace treaty required the Palomarinos to relocate off their territory. Many of them feared that they would be recaptured and enslaved. Zumba attempted to negotiate and offered not to allow fugitive enslaved persons and not to fight against the Portuguese if they could keep their territory. The Portuguese said no. It is also believed Zumba was poisoned from that peace treaty. The next leader would be Zumbi dos Palmares. He was the nephew of Zumba, and he was also the head of the military of the Palmares. He was against the peace treaty with the Portuguese the entire time. He had resistance until 1694 and recaptured by the Portuguese. Here's something that was interesting that I learned. The Dutch would often come after Portuguese territory. I don't know why I'm still looking into that, but they would come after Portuguese territory. And there would be time where the Dutch will partner with the enslaved persons or the free people and say, listen, we'll fight them if you work with us. But again, the Dutch were also some of the biggest slave traders in later on in the, I believe, the 16th century. However, unfortunately, he was recaptured by the Portuguese. He was murdered in 1695. But Palmeiras has always been a symbol of resistance to both the Portuguese and the Dutch. And this is an example of Zumbi, and they're all over Brazil. He is like a huge, huge representative of what it is to be free. And these are just a couple more revolts, so just on the coast, off the coast. Some of these revolts will also be in that Google map. So in 1740, the Jolly Bachelor, while cargo and enslaved persons were being loaded on the ship at the Sierra Leone River, some of the slave persons captured and murdered the crew. So they were actually on the land waiting to be loaded, murdered the crew, stripped the ship of all goods, released those that already boarded. So we have a successful one before the ship even left Africa. 1764, the ship Hope. Enslaved persons revolted after the captain and crew exhibited animosity toward one another. Unfortunately, the captain got overthrown. When the enslaved people came up from the bottom of the deck, they fought in resistance and they were unfortunately recaptured and put back below deck. 1773, off the Guinea coast, enslaved persons accessed the gunpowder and they just blew up the ship. There were no survivors. So again, we're seeing our resistance that death is better than bondage. And lastly, 1789, the Neptune ship. Various Africans from different tribes overthrew the crew. Unfortunately, they were unable to navigate the ship and they were actually recaptured by the British. So, just a quick recap, the average life expectancy of an enslaved person is 7 to 9 years on a sugar plantation. Sugar was the major export and plant cultivated by all European colonies in the 18th century. Coffee, cocoa, and other plants are also huge imports. Africans have revolted on the shores of Africa and sea and upon the arrival of new land. Maroon colonies have long existed in the New World, not just the West Indies, not just South America, but even in the United States. Not all enslaved persons agreed with treaties. It was freedom or death. And lastly, it is important to know we have always fought relentlessly for our humanity. I hope you all enjoyed today's Black as Our History. Stay tuned tomorrow as we go and explore the Jamaican Maroon colonies, and y'all have a blessed day.